Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here with Mitch Reed from No Dice, No Glory. How you doing, Mitch?
Liz, what's up?
What's up is that we have yet another awesome Zenobia finalist interview, this time with Damon Stone, designer of Liberation Haiti. How you doing tonight, Damon?
I am doing fantastic, Liz. Hi, Mitch.
Hey, happy to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Let's just start with the basics, Damon. Tell us about your game.
All right. Well, it is obviously it's a historical board game that the players, which is 1 to 4 count, each play a faction of enslaved or escaped slaves living in the French colony of Saint-Domingue during the early period of the Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1793. And playing as these factions, you're trying to seek the abolition of slavery and social equality.
Excellent. And mechanically, what is the game like? What style of game are we looking at here?
Oh, if I could only give you a short, concise answer with that one. When I first conceived of the game, I just had like these ideas, and I'm like, and I want this, and I want that, and I've been reading through like the history of the Haitian Revolution for, I mean, well over a decade, not continuously, but like constantly referring, going back to it and learning more things, because it is a fascinating piece of history, which I have to say, not nearly enough people understand how important to, I would go so far as to say, all of Western civilization, that one particular engagement was. But in the process of conceiving about how I would make a game that sort of like touched on this, I came up with a really audacious concept, which is 2 games in one. The first game is effectively a deck builder, where you've got a deck of cards, and you are taking those cards to buy more cards, which you use to buy more and better cards. And that is the planning stage of the game. You're essentially planning for the revolution itself. And then at some point you trigger the revolution condition, and you are shoved face first into the revolution itself, whether you're prepared or not. And how easy you have it or how difficult of a climb that you have, this horrendous slug, is going to be determined by how well you planned. And so you take that singular deck of cards that you managed to acquire, and you divide it into 2 separate decks, one which is your unit deck and one which is your materials deck. And then it becomes a strategic board game where you have units that you're moving around the board that you're supplying by deploying cards to your unit roster. So unit 1 might have 2 cards assigned to it, and unit 2 might have 6 cards assigned to it. And you're having to manage your hand. You're having to figure out whether you should be raiding or whether or not you should be raising cities and marching forward to the next location for you to destroy. Whether you should be running away from the National Guard and French colonial armies that are trying to hunt you down and destroy your deployed units. And on top of that, it has multiple win conditions. So you can go for the more direct military victory, burn places, destroy enemy forces, develop victory points, get enough victory points for your player count, and you win. You can go for the more morale victory, which no military engagement is won strictly on morale. But the more that you increase your morale, the more the morale of your opponents decreases, and you get to the point where you can break the civilian back. That is the primary force behind the military force. And so the morale victory comes primarily through card effects from cards deployed to your units, and by raiding plantation regions that exist for each of the various ports and cities, towns. And then there is the much more difficult political victory, which was an option, technically speaking, for the Haitian revolutionaries, but they had the odds just really stacked against them. So it is sort of your nightmare mode. It's like, can I do the thing that was stacked against, the enslaved Africans? So it's there. It's possible. I've done it. It's hard.
So when you heard about Zenobia, is this a game that you're already working on? And what was your motivation behind bringing this to a table?
It was
This
not
subject.
a game I was working on. It was something that, again, as I said, I've been fascinated by the Haitian Revolution, and I had seen Hamilton for the second time, and I was thinking to myself that, as fascinating as the American Revolution is, and how it touches on the French Revolution just ever so tangentially, that, like, I really want some major piece of media about the Haitian Revolution. Like, it just doesn't get, again, the I don't know if the term respect is the right word, but it doesn't get the renown or notoriety. It doesn't get the press that it should. Like, it is in certain places entire semesters or courses devoted to it, but in college, in grad school, for like junior high and high school level, you might not ever even touch on the fact that there was a revolution. And given that, the three of us at least are United States citizens, the way that it impacted the United States is just mind-blowing, and it's almost not mentioned at all. And when it is mentioned, it is literally just a footnote about, so France had some stuff going on, and then Napoleon took over and some more stuff happened. And Napoleon's France was kind of broke and militarily fatigued and needed more money. And so they decided that they were not going to continue with their quest for a French empire in the New World. So then the Louisiana Purchase happened, and the United States doubled its size.
Yeah,
I mean, that's not wrong. It's not right, but it's not wrong.
And it's probably one of the most unique revolutions, I think, in history.
Oh, absolutely.
Where you had an enslaved, because believe it or not, I remember hearing about it in school, where you had an enslaved people actually, well, New York public education, they don't teach you much else. But you had an enslaved population actually free themselves, free the country. And some of the, I know I saw his name, but is a fascinating figure of history. I butcher his name, but
Louverture
is such an interesting character in history that people really should read and understand about, because he you're the expert on this more so than me, but he did a hell of a job, to put it easily.
Yeah. I mean, so you'd asked if this was a game that I was working on, and the answer obviously is no. But the reason why I chose this is because it was something I was fascinated with, and it was something that was on my mind. And like, I read we're looking for underrepresented designers for the Zenobia Award, and you need to give a short brief about what kind of thing that you would want to do as your game. And so it hit me that this was like the perfect opportunity to create a historical game that really dived into this subject. And I did more and more research, and I realized, talking to Harold Buchanan, who was my first mentor, that there was just no good way for me to put forward the entire revolution. And meet the specific kinds of goals that I really wanted to have. A lot of historical games that deal with war or a colonization or revolution put the players in positions where they are on both sides of the war, or multiple sides of the war in some cases, where there's 3 or 4 different parties available. You have games that do things like British companies in the West Indies colonizing and making profit and exploiting the native workforce. And I really didn't want anyone to have to play the role of the French. I didn't want anyone to have to be a slaver. I didn't want anybody to have to be an overseer. I really wanted people to get a visceral feel for what the Haitian Revolution was like from the enslaved Africans. And like, clearly I chose not to go into all of the horrors that they had to face. I really abstracted out in the game. Like, there's a mechanic that addresses it, but it's very subtle, and only by deciding to go deeper into the history does that mechanics, the way that it plays out, start to click, like, oh, this is all of that stuff, but in a way that doesn't make me feel terrible and not want to play the game more than once. And the revolution as a whole involves lots of backstabbing and assassinations, and like, there are, you could legitimately say there are 4 to 6 sides involved in a Haitian revolution at any given time, and everybody was allied with just about everybody else at some point, with the sole exception of the French, the British, and the Spanish. Those are the only 3 factions that were active in Saint Domingue, the colony that became Haiti upon its full liberation, that never joined together. But every other representative of the colonists and enslaved Africans and free Blacks did ally in every possible configuration at one point. And it was just too much for a singular game that was going to need to meet the limit of 2 hours. It's like, I could do this, but we're talking like Twilight Imperium level. We're talking like the War for North Africa level of like complication and abstraction. And it's like, that's too much. Like, any attempt to abstract it to the level where it could fit into 2 hours just wouldn't do it service. So I chose to focus just on the battle for abolition of slavery and social equality.
So had you ever designed a game before Zenobia?
I've designed games professionally for a number of years, but I had never made an attempt at historical games. I had, frankly, always been scared away from historical games. I had watched other people play them, and like I said, I didn't want to put people in the role of having to play, slavers. And I didn't want to put them in a position where they're playing, racially oppressive people. And a significant portion of historical games that I had been exposed to centered themselves around that. And that's just not really, it's not my jam. It's just the easiest way of saying it. Like, I can appreciate them from a mechanical standpoint, and I can appreciate them for the history that they focus on, and even like teach that, like elevate to a level where you're getting it like you're understanding conflicts and the engagements and the battles in a much deeper level than having sat through a high school or undergrad history course probably would leave you with, because, you know, playing games affects you. Like, you walk away thinking in a different way than you did before versus hearing something or even just reading something. It's just that experience of it changes you. And so I just kind of avoided it. And I thought this was a really excellent opportunity to study some of the historical niche games and create something that I would want to play.
So with all that said, would you ever attempt to do another historical game?
Oh my God, I have so many ideas now.
Which is great.
Like, I think that at some point I do want to try and take on the broader scope of the Black people in Saint Domingue and how they eventually found a way to work together and fight the French. Like, but that would be the game. It's like, how are we as players going to find a way to meet each of our individual needs and form an alliance? So I've got this idea of like a semi-cooperative gang where if it's the three of us playing, Liz and you, Mitch, might band together, and I'm sort of like, okay, what am I going to do? How can I make things difficult enough for them that they have to invite me in to this alliance? Or we're all working together, but we all have sometimes contrasting goals. And like, the highest form of victory is a shared mutual victory between all players, which would require meeting certain conditions as a group, but also ensure that each one of us meets our own personal conditions. So like, that's an idea. I was actually was watching a video sort of that you did with Harold and two other people at the sort of like introducing like the Zenobia Award and the board. And one of the people talking, who I believe is one of the board members, was talking about like, she wanted a deck builder about like court poetry as a form of like political intrigue. And I'm like, oh, that is awesome. So I want to do something like, I will definitely make more.
I'm dying to play this now. Yes, you're talking about Christiane Hinz, who is amazing. She's my hero. I wish that I could teach like her. She's so cool.
Yes. So after this is all done, I intend to ask Harold to reach out so that I can get a little bit more background, so I can start doing some research. And yeah, I think that would just be an amazing game. And I think it has a huge potential for crossover appeal.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. And so I have a question. And so you've been designing games for a long time before Zenobia. How did that affect the mentorship process for you? Because some of the designers, had never done this before and maybe would have needed a mentor in a different way. But how did that help you in this process, given that you already kind of knew what you were doing and maybe needed something different?
It's a good question. Like, game mechanics and marriage to theme is something that I consider a specialty of mine. So finding the ways to melt those together, I was pretty comfortable with. But the historicity of it, like how do I get across the parts of the history that I think are meaningful and impactful for the overall subject, but in a way that is not too simulationist, that there's still free will for the players, but also not so hands off, you can do whatever you want, that it just feels like it's like a skinned euro. It's like, yes, we took Agricola and we decided to call it the War of the Roses. There we go. Yep, there, that's it. We just renamed the cards and done, ready for publish. So I really leaned on Harold's expertise and John Truitt, who is my second mentor going into the second stage of the Zenobia Awards, really helped me keep my eye on the historicity, on how to present it in abstracted ways where necessary, and where I could be subtle and where I could allude to things, and then the places where it needed to be upfront and fully fleshed out. So one of the games that I had been a lead designer for a while involved doing a lot of world building. And so a lot of flavor text and story inserts in the expansions were involved. So, you know, it was really great for those people who wanted more of this sort of like cyber noir world. And other people completely ignore it, and it's just about the mechanics to them. And John was really like clear. It's like flavor text is great as like icing on the cake, but you can't rely on the flavor text. You have to push it harder than that. You have to, you know, bake it into the game where the places are a decent representation of the places, the things that are available to the players to choose amongst. The leaders of the revolution, you know, you need to have leaders in the revolution. It can't just be a series of generic cards. And, you know, some of that I had already definitely like keyed in on just because of how I design. And there's other parts of it where it's like, this is really good, but I think you can go further. You know, Harold came up with 1.5 million different questions to ask me to get me to tighten my focus and tighten my design. And it was, I mean, like, this game would have probably been a hot mess or been narrowed to like, here is a 6 month period in this war, because this is the only way that I can figure out how to get the history in. So yeah, the mentorship was invaluable.
And Harold, he is no stranger to some of those cooperative games.
Yes.
And
yes.
and parts of history. Not a fan of Here I Stand because everybody gangs up against me, but it is an amazing game.
I feel your pain. When I play, my friends and family will frequently gang up against me.
Because you're the game designer. I would too.
That is their excuse.
Yeah. You know, it beats whatever they can say otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they love you and respect you, and but
so they say.
So that you know, you can't trust family because they were there when you got here. So looking back at your gaming history, I see there's a game shelf behind you. But what were some of the, let me phrase this differently. What was the game that you played that you probably still own today that pushed your life down this path of becoming a gamer?
Well, my dad taught me chess, and that sort of just instilled this concept of games being more than chutes and ladders and Candyland, that like there was actual skill and strategy and a 30-second tactical view of the board, and then making the first thing that's, I don't know, that might work, was a terrible way to play games that were not just purely, you know, about random number generation. So that is a game that, you know, I still I still hearken to. I still have my wife and I break out the chess set, not infrequently. I'm definitely no longer the same skilled player that I was when I was playing it like daily in junior high school, but it's still a game near and dear to my heart. And the second one, I would say, which sort of branched me out of just strategy games into lifestyle hobby entertainment games, I would have to say it was D&D. First edition, Red Book, Blue Book, and getting in there and recognizing that there is an entire world within this, and I can play a game for not just longer than 20 or 30 minutes, or longer than an hour, or longer than 3 hours, but for 10 years. And between those two games, I would say I was doomed. I was going to be a gamer for life, and the way my mind works is anything that I enjoy enough to play or to just participate in for, at least a year is something that I feel required to understand at the deepest level that I can. And it just got to the point where it's like breaking down what other people were doing and creating strategy guides for various, CCGs, and then, playtesting games was not enough. I had to start actually making my own.
Yeah, there's no 12-step program for games.
So speaking of getting excited about more games, though, so I think it's time for the traditional question. We've asked this of everybody, so we're gonna ask it of you.
Great.
So we know that the Zenobia finalists have been hanging out, showing each other games online, developing a bond. So whose game, other than your own, has been the most exciting for you?
See, if I name a name, then
everybody
else is gonna be like, "Why didn't you name it?" I'm mostly kidding. I'll be completely honest. From the beginning, there were amongst the people who made it to the finals, there have only been 2 games that just blew my mind away when I heard about the proposal and I wanted to play. And that is, I can't pronounce the name of the game.
Is it Wendy Kause, the Machu Picchu game?
Yes.
That was going to be my guess. That was mine. And then should we guess on what the other one was?
Feel free.
It seems like that Winter Rabbit seems to be a lot of people's favorite.
I was going to say, it's either Winter Rabbit or Molly House, because those come up.
The other one. Yeah. That was the other one.
Yeah.
The only reason why Winter Rabbit pulled my attention a bit more than Molly House is because the root concept of the game about history from a very specific cultural view is like just fascinating. It would have never occurred to me. So yeah.
It is fresh. I'm excited for it. I'm excited for Liberation Haiti too, though, because you know what? Not everybody paid attention to us lonely solo gamers, and I want to play this game.
Yeah, it was definitely a goal that I wanted to achieve. Was to have a game that had a solo mode to it, and the player count chooses which factions you have the ability to play. So solo, you play the Maroons, who are formerly enslaved. They are people who escaped their slavery and live in the mountains of Saint Domingue, and they have a special thing that they can do, whereas every faction is associated with a province except for the Maroons. They have a virtual province, which is mountainous regions. So you can only deploy units into your province. You can move them anywhere you want, but they have to originate there. And so in this solo game, like that's just death if you play just the North, because the South and the West go crazy and then they completely crush you. So you play as the Maroons, which means that you're having to try and manage the entire board, but you can like just pop somebody down, right in the middle of an area and take advantage of the fact that it is currently poorly defended. And once I sort of like locked onto that mindset of, oh, the different player counts will make you choose between different factions, and I can control what the experience is going to be like from a strategic level, so that you are not just, behind the 8 ball from the get-go. I mean, there's still the planning stage, so yeah, certainly can be, but that's on you.
Yeah, I'm excited for this game, and I have to play it. So, but when I looked at this, it was just a title that, like, yeah, that needs to be taught more. I'm glad somebody is making a game out of that. And you did.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So we are super excited for your game. We've been so happy to have you on. And if people want to get in touch with you and ask you questions, where can you be found online?
I am at iLogos on Twitter. That is probably the easiest place to find me. Where I am on other forms of social media, it is more I enjoy like seeing what is out there than actively participating. But if I'm, tweeting about a game, or if I'm talking about a game, it's going to be tweeted out. So that's the place.
Fantastic. So I'm very excited to play Liberation Haiti. Everyone, I'm Liz Davidson. You can find me anywhere beyond Solitaire. You can find Mitch anywhere as No Dice, No Glory. And this has been Damon Stone, Zenobia Award finalist and designer of Liberation Haiti. Happy gaming, everybody.